colleges and universities that fail to guarantee every student a relevant, in-field, and hopefully paid work experience before they're graduated into a full-time job search will be viewed as an anachronism.
How can we bring together not just vocational but higher ed, but also industry? There's a lot of really good training programs. How can we actually bring that into the whole mix as well, so it becomes a seamless exercise?
The taxpayer is subsidizing an individual university student to an individual apprentice. The ratio is 50-1. We have resources now to cover the cost of the training, provide an incentive, and subsidize the apprentice wage. And that's how you get apprentice growth.
Welcome to another episode of Relearning Work, where we dive into the future of learning and work. In each episode, we bring you conversations with leaders from industry and education to challenge assumptions, propose ideas, and share learnings as we all navigate this world that is being reshaped by Agentic AI. Now, whether you're an educator, a student, or a business executive looking to stay ahead in this rapidly changing landscape, there's something here for you. I'm your host, David Yip. My guest today is Ryan Craig, an investor, author, and education change agent. He's managing director at Achieve Partners in the US, co-founder of Apprenticeships for America, and the sharp pen behind the bi-weekly his trilogy of books, College Disrupted, A New You, and most recently, Apprentice Nation, has made him the go-to voice for earn while you learn pathways that outperform ever more expensive degrees. I met Ryan this year at the GSV ASU Summit, where you talked about scaling apprenticeships, whether college is still worth it, and how a new ecosystem is emerging to serve the gap between learning and earning. Ryan joins us today to explore how intermediaries can unlock millions of new earn while you learn opportunities across all industries. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you so much. What an introduction. I prefer apprenticeship aficionado and bon vivant. So, but I'll take it.
Yeah, no, you have an impressive background and a long one too in advocating the need for this very, very important transformation that we have to do. Can you take us through a bit of a background? How did you get to this place? Because you started off as a consultant and you in private equity. How did you get here?
Yeah, it wasn't a straight line for sure. So the big jump was I was a McKinsey consultant, went to law school, out of law school, went to work at Columbia University, which was my entree into the education world. I helped Columbia build sort of new online education ventures. And from there, went to Warburg Pincus, the big private equity firm in New York, where I built out their education and training investment, which was exciting and fun. And from there, since then, for the last 22 years, I've been investing in or operating education-related businesses. So for the last almost 15 years, my own firm, now Achieve Partners. And the jump, we began investing in sort of the early teens, 2012 and you can see behind me, you named the book, my second book, Faster and Cheaper Alternatives to College. We were looking at unemployment and underemployment numbers coming out of the Great Recession. And of course, we assumed they would recover, and we didn't see them recovering. And we suspected it was the result of some kind of secular trend, perhaps digitization and digital transformation, basically changing the nature of work that employers need done and entry-level jobs in particular, while of course our education system was not changing nearly as fast, if at all. And so that was the conundrum we were focused on. I continue to say that our system of primary, secondary, and tertiary education in this country, and I think in most countries, including Australia, is doing as good a job as it's ever done at equipping young people with the, cognitive skills and durable skills, the critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, communication skills they need to be successful. The problem is that digital transformation has caused the economy and jobs and employer skill needs to kind of move away at light speed. And so you need all of that, but then you also need specific digital skills, platform skills, and increasingly industry and role experience in order to qualify for the entry-level jobs that you and I got a generation ago when we graduated from university. So has changed. The first chapter of my new book, Apprentice Nation, starts with sort of a metaphor around college or university as being a closed ecosystem, close off to the market, which obviously has changed dramatically over the last 20 to 30 years. And so we can't afford to be closed, or if it remains closed, we need additional or alternative investments in order to equip young people to get those, get their feet firmly on the first rung of a career ladder in 2025. And we're seeing, by the way, I mean, in this country, it's now graduation time, and the early reports on class of 2025 graduates are that the employment outcomes are much worse than they were last year. And last year, they were much worse than they were in 23. And I'm concerned that on an underemployment rate of college grads, let alone those who don't complete college or even go to college, is going to skyrocket over the next few years unless we do something differently.
Yeah. And if we compare that to the trend line for the cost of college education as well. So you have the declining ROI, but you have the increasing costs. It's just not a sustainable model.
Yeah, well, again, that's part of, I think, the college or university being a closed ecosystem. And of course, in both countries, really, heavily subsidized by the government, and certainly more subsidized than alternative earn and learn pathways have been.
Now, one of the things I ask all of my guests to really start to set the scene for how we need to change and transform, we have to get into a new mindset. And in order to get into a new mindset, we first of all have to be aware of some of these assumptions that we are making day to day. A lot of them might not be aware of these assumptions. But in your view, if we do need to think about changes or new kind of models, what are some assumptions that we might be making we need to change, or at least be aware of, so we can shift that mindset into one that's looking at things differently?
Well, I think the biggest one is, of course, those who are making policy decisions around what we should be funding, what we should be supporting, are those who were successful a generation ago. And so it worked for me. And so why shouldn't everyone have the opportunity I had, which I think is in large part a source of the College for All movement, which has dominated America, the discourse here around post-secondary education for the last decade. And it really became, sort of chapter and verse for the Democratic Party, that we want universal college access, we want free college, we want student loan forgiveness, because that's what worked for those of us who, could have came in age in the 70s, 80s, and of course, it's a different economy students are graduating into now. So what worked a generation ago may not be working today. So I think that's the biggest. The other is that it's a classroom is the best place to learn skills. I think we know is not true. Obviously, for centuries, students have learned the trades and other trades, not in a classroom, but on the. So we've did apprenticeship, for example. To raise the A word, is really the way to learn to use tools. And if you think about the digital economy and the fact that you're using software, SaaS or platform applications to manage business processes, those are tools. So they're much harder to learn in a classroom than they are by doing on the job. And then you add to that the experience gap that we're seeing, where jobs that used to be entry-level jobs used to be accessible to new college grads, where you could graduate with no relevant work experience whatsoever. And the fact that you had a degree, the fact that you knew how to think and solve problems and write, and seemed to be be able to get along with people, was enough to, hire you and bring you into an organization. That's no longer the case. We're seeing jobs that used to be entry-level jobs implicitly or explicitly ask for months or years in some cases of relevant work experience. And AI, I'm sure we'll talk about AI, is going to turn that experience gap into a chasm.
Yeah, that experience gap is just growing. It was already pretty big, and AI is just going to make it even bigger. And it's becoming a lot clearer to me in the last year, where we're going to have a really big problem, because what AI is really good for Because I have to think, oh well, AI, will help everyone, but I think it's going to disproportionately help the experienced people, the experts, the professionals who already have the experience, and you know, people who can use AI, can ask the right questions of AI to make it produce the right outcomes. And if you don't have experience, it's actually, I found it really hard to ask good questions when you don't have when you don't have a lot of experience and expertise in a subject already. So it's chicken or the egg, right? People think, oh, you can ask AI and it can actually provide you with all the answers, but it's actually very hard to do so if you don't have some expertise already.
I couldn't agree more. I think you said it very, very well. You don't have industry experience, you don't have role experience, you don't understand the business processes in the organization. You're not going to be able to use AI. And think about it another way, which is, when you and I started, we were hired without relevant experience, and we did kind of
Mm,
menial work for the
mm,
first 6 to 12 months while we learned the ropes. We learned that stuff,
mm,
and that menial work was, not useless to the employer. It needed to be done,
mm,
and so we did that work. But now that work is going to be done by AI, and
mm,
employers are going to expect their new workers to use AI from the get go. And so instead of that being 80% of your work time, it will be 2% of your work time because you'll be using AI to do it. And they'll be expecting the other 98% to be higher value work, higher
mm,
value client work, higher value product work, higher value project work. But the rub is you're not going to be able to do that higher value work without prior work experience. You just can't.
mm,
You're not going to know what to do. So maybe it's a different way of saying what you were saying, but the point is that there's just going to be no more budget or reason to
mm,
hire people who won't be sort of AI assisted productive
mm,
from
mm.
one. And
Yeah,
to do that, you need to know stuff
yeah,
about
yeah.
industry, about the job, about the business processes.
Now you mentioned before apprentices, right? And we were speaking about assumptions before and trades. Usually, those are interlinked. Whenever I hear the word apprentice, immediately my mind goes to trades. When I think about electricians, carpenters, plumbers, we typically don't think of apprentices as white collar professionals. But that's a really big assumption. That's a big blind spot that would actually limit our ability to new opportunities for bringing on apprentices, right?
That's a great point. That's another assumption that we need to change. In fact, in my book, I intentionally don't talk about apprenticeships in the trades because actually the book is focused on the U.S.
Mm,
and that's the one sector in the U.S. where I'd say we have a somewhat healthy apprenticeship economy. We could be doing a lot better, but
mm,
it's like other countries are 10x the U.S. on
mm,
trade apprentices as per capita, whereas across the board, Australia is kind of 8 or 9x the U.S. In terms of
mm.
apprentices per capita. Germany, Switzerland, Austria are 15x the U.S.
Wow.
on apprentices per capita. So it's much more common in Australia to launch a career as an apprentice in accounting, for example, than it is here, where college is the only pathway. Then you have to hope that you're hired by a firm out of college. There is no earn and learn pathway to accounting or, most of the tech jobs that college graduates are having an increasingly hard time getting, which is what my firm does. I mean, Achieve Partners, we are a private equity firm. We focus on sectors of the economy where there's a massive talent gap. And then we actually buy services businesses in those sectors and build the first apprenticeship program in those sectors so the companies become talent engines in their talent
Mhm.
starved sectors, which accelerates the growth and expands the margins of our companies. So we're doing we're well and a lot of good by helping to launch thousands of careers that wouldn't have been launched otherwise.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's great to hear you say that. Australia's actually doing quite well in this space, and it's already producing some good directional numbers at least. But being here, I do think there is still a lot more that we can do. We do have a pretty healthy and a very important vocational education sector. A couple of years ago, there was a lot of activities around reform, mainly the higher education part of and the Universities Accord launched a whole bunch of activities. And right now, there's an active program of work to harmonize between higher ed and vocational, which is fantastic because it is a step in the right direction to bring together two very important parts of education and making it truly student-centric. Because for a long time, I was looking at it and go, wow, this is hard for the student to navigate. If I am doing a degree and I want to get a certificate from what we call vocational institutions, TAFEs over here, Technical for Education, I think you call them community colleges, it just wasn't possible or was very, very to do. But now at least there is a concerted effort. It'll take some time, but at least it's been recognized as a concerted effort to harmonize and bring these two closer together, which is really good. And there's a lot of things that we can learn about the vocational and how they manage apprenticeships and work integrated learning. The universities are looking at what's there. But I kind of sit across both of them and I look at that and go, well, how can we bring together not just vocational, but higher ed, but also industry, right? Because there's a lot of workforce development programs, inside big companies. I used to be head of education at Salesforce, and in Salesforce, there's a lot of really good training programs, which are free, Trailhead. A lot of big companies, KPMG, they have a lot of very sophisticated training programs. How can we actually bring that into the whole mix as well, so it becomes a seamless exercise?
Well, you do that, and you may go some way to closing the skills gap, but you're not going to do anything about the experience gap. Which is why work-based learning is so important. It's not just a question of integrating skills training into the existing education system. That's not enough. If that were enough, coding boot camps here a decade ago, which was the big trend, would have solved the problem. We owned coding boot camps, and we saw firsthand that we weren't achieving the kind of employment or financial outcomes we were hoping for. For the simple reason that not a lot of companies are excited about hiring someone who's kind of fresh out of coding boot camp, who's never actually worked as a software developer before. And you can say the same about a Salesforce admin or Salesforce developer or Workday Pro certified analyst, or you name it. Work experience is everything. And so I'm convinced that, particularly with what we were talking about with AI, that in a few years' time, colleges and universities that fail to guarantee every student, regardless of program of study, a relevant in-field and hopefully paid work experience before they're graduated into a full-time job search will be viewed as an anachronism, because you'll be unemployable. That's, if you graduate from, or Yale, probably you'll be fine, at least for the foreseeable future, because the students who get in there are worth investing in, right? You bring in someone, and it's worth having someone investing 6 months to a year to them, because they'll be more valuable in a year or two. But for the most part, unemployment, underemployment will be a huge problem for students who don't get those work experiences. And so, we need to think about a spectrum of work-based learning, where on the right side, you've got, the most involved, the most difficult from an employer, the most involved being apprenticeship, which is a full-time job, right, with built-in, and that's a big reason why most aren't essentially employed by their ultimate employer initially. They're employed by an intermediary, or an intermediary is playing the role there. But it's not just apprenticeship. Here we have what we call co-op programs, which is during your university program, you take 4 or 5 months in a year, and work, and you're earning credit while you're doing it, and it's related to your program of study. From there, typically over the summer, while you're or maybe during the term as well on a part-time basis, and then projects, right? So it's a whole spectrum from apprenticeships, co-ops, internships, projects. But what they have in common is that they all require intermediaries to set up and run these programs, because employers ain't going to do it, and simply are incapable of doing it at scale, for the simple reason that Macquarie is not going to have a relationship with every Australian university for a co-op program, and if they were, JP Morgan Chase is not going to have a relationship with 5,000 American universities for co-op
Yeah.
programs. So there's
Yeah.
a many-to-many problem that you need an intermediary to solve and aggregate the demand for and supply of work-based learning. And we're really just in the very early stages of the emergence of these ecosystems. In America, the most developed ecosystems are on either end of the spectrum, where you've got a couple hundred apprenticeship intermediaries that aren't as developed as those in Australia, thanks to your better funding model than we have here. And then you have on the other end, you've got platforms that are sort of aggregating projects, individuals that, for example, a student might complete as a capstone experience in her course, and getting 40 hours of experience on a project and getting some feedback from an employer, being able to put that on her CV. We have platforms like Ripen here, and I think there's platforms in Australia as well, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of work. But in between, universities are going to need a heck of a lot of assistance with internship and co-op for those students, because they're not set up to develop and run these programs themselves. In America, you can count on two hands the number of 5,000 or 4,000 schools, the institutions that actually have well-developed co-op programs where, say, over half of all enrolled students will participate in a co-op. So 10 of 4 or 5,000. It's very hard to set up. The two that are most well-developed in the U.S., they started their lives as night schools, which is like almost like a vocational school, which explains how the way they did. And these programs have been around for decades. So we don't have decades for thousands of other universities to develop it. We need these programs set up and run in the next few years.
Yeah, definitely well before the end of this decade, right? Which is 4 or 5 years, and sooner if we can. We've seen how quickly DeepSeek appeared on the scene. So these things are going to be popping up, and employers are moving ahead, whether education institutions catch up or not.
Agreed.
Which is the urgency. And the other thing as well is that a lot of education institutions, that the employers would number one, keep employing and educate. But employers or companies, their primary job is not, companies, if they can get away with not employing, they won't employ, right? Their primary job is to earn, produce a product and service and earn an income and ROI for their shareholders, So training is something that is something that they rather not do if they don't have to.
What I wrote in Apprentice Nation, I began referring to them as employers, and then I stop myself and say, well, hold on a second. They don't think about themselves. They don't think of themselves first and foremost as employers. If they could have 0 employees, they would do it in a heartbeat. It would eliminate all their problems and dramatically increase their margins. They're companies that provide a valued product or service, and an employer being an employer is an input to that or incidental to that, but certainly not core to that. And so the problem is, and this is another one of your sort of question, how do we need, what kind of paradigm or thought shifts we need? Those of us who think about this and care about these issues tend to come out of the education sphere. Many of us have never worked in the private sector. Even fewer have sort of actually owned or run companies and an employer. And I think there's little understanding of what's there. And the assumption is that, of course, employers care about training and will invest in that and so forth. I wish that were the case, but I have a Hobbesian view of others, sort of nasty, brutish, and short. But that's what the market. That's
reality.
Reality, and we need to, instead of waiting for reality to change, we need to adjust our education system to fit reality. As our former Secretary of Defense in this country said, vis-a-vis Iraq, ill-fated Iraq war, we go to, you don't go to a war with the army you wish for, you go to war with the army you have. And so that's the army we have, and we need to adjust our expectations.
The other one as well, which I find a lot, is the universities, at least over here, they tend to have a lot of programs, a lot of initiatives with industry, with companies. But by and large, they're just the larger companies, the companies that actually have HR departments, actually have internship programs. These programs are quite expensive to run, right? And which is that you're actually only focusing on a small segment of the whole economy. Most of the Australian economy, and I'm sure it's similar to in the US, are actually small to medium businesses, right? Companies which are 10, 20 people, 100 people. These companies usually don't even have HR, right? And let alone an internship program, and so they just want to get on with their business. And if institutions are not engaging with the vast majority of employers, then how are you ever going to get scale?
Yeah, I do. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce this week put out a small business guide for setting up an internship program. And I know they're trying to be helpful. Did you read this guide? It's not very long. It's like a lot of work. They say, we got, 1, develop roles with purpose. 2, build a smart onboarding process. 3, assign mentors and establish check-in points. 4, offer real learning opportunities. 5, create a strong exit process. 6, refine your program regularly.
Yeah.
That's not something that most small businesses are going to have the time or resources for.
Yeah.
And that's again, we need intermediaries, and we need public policy and funding to support the emergence of intermediaries who are going to set up and run these programs. 'Cause otherwise, they're not going to exist.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my investors he had a business. He was in a Salesforce ecosystem, and he saw the value of what we're doing, because his company, before he sold it, had about 50 people in it, and he had no dedicated HR. Right, because they were just running, really, really, and people wearing multiple hats. And he would love to have engage universities and employ students for short gigs, but the process and the red tape was just, made it just too hard.
Yeah, and if you think that's hard, then try setting up a registered apprenticeship program in this
Yeah,
country, where the Department of Labor requires that you adopt, on average, probably 20 new policies, workforce policies you didn't have before, because at some point, someone in some industry, likely a building trade, thought that was a necessary safety or other policy. I spoke a few years back with a CHRO of a Fortune 500 company who had gone through the process of registering an apprenticeship program, and he told me he's never going to do that again. Not worth it.
yeah,
Not worth it. And at least in Australia, though, there's funding that follows from that. In this country, there is none. So you register for no reason, because the only funding is if then you get put on a state approved list, and then you go on bended knee to your local workforce board and somehow get an allocation of scarce workforce dollars to your apprentices, in which case it's only those you're hiring in that local area, as opposed to regionally or nationally. So system makes no sense at all, and we need to change it to be more like yours, where the funding follows the apprentice, and every apprentice hired, the training and there's an incentive as well to the employer or intermediary, which is to cover the cost of the overhead involved in managing the program, and employers and up and running these programs, and in some cases subsidizing the apprentice wage, which is what you guys did during COVID, which
yeah,
is extremely impressive in terms of apprenticeship growth. That's something that I think is actually a use of public funds, and if you compare the extent to which the taxpayer is subsidizing, an individual university student to an individual apprentice. In this country, the ratio is 50 to 1. So for every dollar that an apprentice receives of public support, a university student is receiving $50.
wow,
So I don't know whether the right ratio is 1 to 1 or 1 to 10, but it shouldn't be 1 to 50. And there's a lot that we can do if we set it to 1 to 1 or 1 to 2. Then we have resources now to cover the cost of the training, provide an incentive to the intermediary or employer setting up this program, and subsidize the apprentice wage. And that's how you get apprentice growth.
yeah. So I guess getting into specific examples then or solutions that you've seen that actually works and scales. Um, so there are a lot of challenges, yes, but how can we work through them? What are people that we can actually look to say, well, this is a pretty interesting solution that works, solves that problem, and this is another one, and so on. Yeah.
Well, on apprenticeship at Achieve, we are building what I call private market solutions in sectors where the talent gap is so big that employers or clients are willing to pay a bill rate for newly
Mm-hmm.
trained talent that allows our companies to pay more than a living wage to those apprentices from day one of training and get them through training out to client work. And the point, the variance between the bill rate and the pay rate will cover the cost of it. So that's not every sector. There are hundreds of sectors in tech services and healthcare services where that's true, but there are thousands or tens of thousands more where clients aren't willing to pay that kind of that rate. And that's where, as I said, public funding comes in. Because if there
Mm-hmm.
were that kind of support, then maybe you need that rate. Maybe you'd need a rate half that much because
Mm-hmm.
you have the subsidy built in. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what we're looking for scale. We and by we I mean this nonprofit that I helped found called Apprenticeships for America, which is the umbrella association of apprenticeship intermediaries in the United States. We're about 300 apprenticeship intermediaries, but
Mm-hmm.
all relatively small. We've been pushing a formula-based paid per apprentice model
Mm-hmm.
where in post-secondary education in this country, where the funding flows with the student, funding should flow with the apprentice. And the
Mm-hmm.
crazy thing is, as I document in the book, the way we've been funding apprenticeship up until now has been grants, where the
Mm-hmm.
Department of Labor has been basically trying to pick winners and providing grants to workforce boards and community colleges, none of whom ever launch an apprenticeship program or hire an apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, you have a directory of registered apprenticeship programs the Department of Labor maintains called Rapids, where most of those programs are actually not real apprenticeship programs. They exist on paper, but there's not actually an employer looking to hire apprentices because they're driven by grant funding, and the grants fund the development of the curriculum for the classroom training component of the apprenticeship. But of course, that's putting the cart before the horse. That's not the
Mm-hmm.
hardest part of creating apprenticeship. Is not the curriculum. The hardest part is finding an employer willing to hire and pay an unproductive resource for months or years.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to put the employer or employment horse before the training cart. And that's another paradigm shift is on apprenticeship in particular. We've thought of apprenticeship as just another training or workforce development program, and it's not. It's different. It's work first and foremost, with built-in training, with a real employer, with skin in the game, taking risk
Yeah.
and paying that employee. And so it's very different from your what I call derisively train and pray workforce
Mm-hmm.
development programs, where there's no
Mm-hmm.
employer on the other end. This is
Mm-hmm.
this is a job, and that's why apprenticeship leads to such great employment outcomes relative to other sort of workforce pathways.
Mm-hmm.
It is fundamentally different, distinct, and should be treated and funded distinctly from other workforce development programs.
So I guess to really try, can you start with work first. You don't start with the training or the education first. You start with the work first, and you start with the employer who needs the work to be done, and you pay the pays for the work done, and through that you actually deliver the training and education.
Right. The rub is that obviously folks who need apprenticeship programs aren't going to be productive initially, which
Mm,
is why you need intermediaries who are
mm,
willing to
mm,
take the risk when those unproductive workers, invest in them, and then reap the benefits once they become,
mm.
as I say,
Yeah,
Achieve has demonstrated we can do that across hundreds of sectors where there's a particular talent, but not across the economy,
yeah.
not without public policy change.
And you mentioned two sectors, health and educate, so health and technology,
Yeah.
as two that have the dynamics. They can pay above
Yeah.
certain rates to make it worthwhile. So start with the higher value sectors,
Yeah.
more in demand ones first, and then build some momentum, build some scale before rolling out to other sectors. Not going where demand necessarily is, but going to where the higher value, the higher paying sectors first.
Yeah, and this is about changing behavior with employers as well, the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate employers of this talent. And so, there are lots of nonprofits that want to start with, what I would say are the hardest cases of what are called, we call in this country opportunity youth, those from underprivileged backgrounds and so forth. And while no one is more supportive of providing pathways for those people than I am, let's be
Mm-hmm.
realistic here, which is we need to sort of lay the tracks first.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to do that, the way to change employer behavior around apprentices is to deliver the best talent you possibly can first,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and hopefully better talent than they're seeing from university
Yeah.
programs, because we not only our apprentices not only have the skills, they have the experience
Yeah.
as well, and change behavior in that way. So that's sort of how we're focused. In this country, again, the unemployment and underemployment rate among university graduates is so high that every
Mm.
time one of our companies launches an apprenticeship program, we have 300 applicants for every place in the
Yeah.
program. So it's that is our programs are more selective than
Mm.
Harvard,
Mm. Mm.
and so that speaks to the lack of infrastructure that we've
Mm.
developed. We have America overinvested in classroom-based, tuition-based debt launch infrastructure. We've dramatically
Mm.
underinvested in work-based, earn and learn career launch infrastructure,
Mm.
and that's bad already. But with the emergence of AI, it's going to rip out the bottom two or three rungs on the career ladder,
Yeah.
and you're only going to have a small fraction of young people who are able to ascend and get that good first job and be on their way. And you'll have just a huge population of and underemployed young people, which is going to result in stunted economic growth and social instability. So I think that the folks who work with me at Achieve and those who work with me at Apprenticeships for America are convinced that this is sort of the issue of our time.
Mm-hmm.
It may seem work-based learning may seem like a kind of wonky niche issue, but it's really at the core of, I think, what is ailing America. Why did half the country vote for Donald Trump? I
Mm.
think they voted for Donald Trump because they see sort of bright shining digital economy, but they're told that the only pathway to participating in that economy is through 4 years of university, $100,000 of tuition and debt with no guaranteed employment outcome. That doesn't sound like a very good bet. And so
Mm.
most of those
Mm.
people don't do it or don't succeed. And as a result, they're kind of shut out of the economy. I wrote an article a couple of years ago kind of summarizing the plight of young Americans called College or Chipotle, which, that those are your choices. Basically,
Yeah.
we don't have those sort of middle earn and learn options where you maybe don't need to take on inordinate financial risk and take on employment risk as those who are matriculating into a university program today are, but rather you can, out of high school, for example, take a job and learn, and within 5 or 10 years, you'll be well on your way on a successful career where you can be making six figures. That
Mm.
is exceedingly rare in this
Mm.
country. Now, we don't have those pathways, and we desperately need them.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned changing employer behavior. That's so one thing that we're aiming to do, and we're working with some early adopter employers to do so, because we're very much working in this space, earn while you learn. But we're connecting employers to very short-term gig workers, university students, which who actually do have a lot of skills. Many of them actually don't really appreciate the skills that are very valuable that employers are looking for, right? But employers also, companies also, they often, when they think about, hiring, they immediately think about hiring someone long-term, permanent, someone who's going to be onboarded and trained and so on. But at the same time, though, for a long time, I worked in large corporates like IBM and DXC, services organizations. There's never any shortage of work, right? In fact, there's always a backlog of work that needs to be done. And a lot of work that needs to be done is actually there's a lot of, I guess, complex, messy work that is that human to do. It's very hard to point a piece of technology at, right? But people tend to not think about that those tasks, I should say, not work or jobs, but tasks, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it obviously it's, someone with some skill and time to sort of separate those out into projects that perhaps an intern or gig worker could.
Yeah.
I'm on the board of Ripen, which
Mm,
is the sort of leading project-based, work-based learning platform, and most of those employers on that platform are not large companies, but
mm.
very small companies where the owner is able to say, "Oh, I'd like to have this done," and like
Yes.
puts it on the platform themselves. So
Yes.
yeah, but yeah, if we could figure out how to make it easier for employers to that, and but that's exactly my point, which is that you need an experienced intermediary who can look at,
Mm,
the work that an employer needs done and begin parceling that out into
mm,
discrete projects that could be completed by not just one, but 100 or 1,000
mm, mm,
students, and then aggregate it up, perhaps with AI into a
mm.
final very useful work product
Yeah.
for the company. That's valuable
Yeah.
for the company, and obviously incredibly valuable for the students who otherwise wouldn't have that work
Yeah.
experience.
And is that over the life of their university degree, let's say 3 or 4 years, if they do a number of gigs, 20, 30 gigs, the accumulated experience would actually be quite valuable in actually providing them that edge to get to full-time employment. It kind of solves that problem, either an all or nothing approach, right? To either hire someone for a full time or don't hire someone. Is that intermediary can hire someone for a short gig for a few days, a few weeks to do a little project, and then and on. And for small business at least, they may not have it headcount to hire someone full time, but they certainly have budget to do little projects and to deliver short engagements because the customers needs it.
Yeah, the key to scaling work-based learning is to reduce or remove the risk and work required by employers.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's something that's very difficult for universities to do. Universities are unlikely to be the employers of their students. It has. I give one example but it's quite rare. They're not to do. And then that's what's needed, and that's obviously the role of the intermediary. I happen to think that the scaled intermediaries 10 years from now in the space will be highly platform driven. The work will be done on the platform, sort of AI assisted or agent assisted, with kind of real time feedback, aggregating up the work employers to make it useful
Mm,
for them. The employer of record, so there's no sort of HR connection to the ultimate employer until the ultimate employer decides that they want to actually hire this
yeah.
individual. That's what our
Yeah.
achieve. That's what our companies do. Our companies are all the employers of record, usually for 2 years before our company's clients then want to hire this tech or
Hmm.
healthcare services. It just
Mm,
makes it much easier for companies to say yes to apprentices when there's just no risk, no reason not to. Right? Someone is offering you talent you can't find otherwise at a lower rate than you would otherwise pay with no risk because they're not your employee. That sounds pretty good to me. And so that's the way
mhm.
we need to think. And obviously, that's not the way that sort of those of us who come out of the education world have been trained to think.
Um, now, can you talk to some of the skills that your portfolio companies are in the tech and health area they're hiring from? What are the most important ones that they look to apprentices to be productive very quickly or already have?
Yeah,
Actually,
so
maybe
that's the
maybe we
thing.
start with the already have one first. Yeah.
Well, already have. We're very religious about this, which is we don't expect our is to already have relevant tech skills because we're pretty confident we can deliver those during the
Mm,
apprenticeship program. So tech or platform skills. We also don't expect them to have relevant industry or role experience as well. So our companies
mm,
are assessing candidates based on cognitive skills, durable skills, aptitude
mm,
to learn the
mhm,
tech platform,
mhm,
interest,
mm,
in the or in the industry. Diversity. If we can
Mm-hmm.
help our companies help their clients diversify what are typically very non-diverse tech workforces. And by diversity, I don't mean race; I mean economically as well. Most of these tend to come from sort of lower income, which makes sense. They're to or in most need this most equitable pathway, right? They don't need to pay tuition or take on risk to sort of career launch. So that's how companies think of it. Obviously, different companies, different roles are going to find different. So for example, our Workday company, Helios, many of the most successful apprentices from their Horizons in their program are psychology
Mm-hmm.
majors who obviously are interested in human thinking and human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so HR is maybe a great place for them to end up in. And now they're going to be HR, IT, or HRIS,
Mm-hmm.
starting with their career on the Workday platform as Workday Pro certified consultants or Workday analysts.
But those psychology students, do you find that when they start exploring career pathways, actually, how many of them would think of themselves as working in a tech company?
No, not many at all. And so, yeah, that's the thing. But there are tens of or hundreds of thousands of them out there
Yeah.
who are underemployed and have either graduated or have some college and are working in a frontline retail or food service job.
Mm-hmm.
And the opportunity to have a very clear career and pathway to making six figures is extremely attractive to
Yeah.
them if they've and them have probably never heard of Workday before they
Yeah. Yeah.
find this pathway. But this is
And
the platform that makes HR work at
and
large
for
enterprise.
people, students who study psychology and who had never heard of Workday, their views. I might be overgeneralizing, and tell me if this is not the right way to think about it. Their view, a tech company or a tech job is maybe coding or software,
Totally,
right?
yeah, they don't get it. Yeah, it is that coding. First of all, is being hugely disrupted by AI. But what's not being disrupted by AI are these tech services jobs where you need folks to actually run. Every large enterprise has, dozens, if not hundreds, of tech platforms that are used to manage business processes in the organization. And these platforms are all implemented, configured, and usually integrated with one another and require admins and analysts and consultants and developers to inside the organization to make them work for the organization. And so, you might be writing code at some point, but probably not. Probably you're just, you're an expert on, several modules or the platform, and you can solve problems and you can configure it and you can help integrate it with new platforms when required. All these things are needed, and there are tens of thousands of services businesses out there to delivering these services to all these different ecosystems, and they obviously need this talent. They have to be trained. They usually is a certification from the software company. But these are good jobs of the 21st century. I mean,
Yeah.
President Trump wants to reshore manufacturing. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
too many young people who want to work in a factory, but I know lots of young people who want these jobs because they're
Mm-hmm.
great. And
Mm-hmm.
you develop an expertise, and you're sort of core to your organization, and you're making things work.
But I think
So
there's a bit of an awareness building and even an education exercise that needs to be done, a marketing activity that needs to be done to help not just students, but even educators be aware
totally,
of,
I gave
you
a
know,
I gave a talk a few years ago to university presidents, and I asked them how many of your schools provide any training at all on the Salesforce platform or
yeah,
curriculum. And not one hand went up on it. And
yeah,
Salesforce is basically the operating system of business. And you're graduating students who don't even know what Salesforce is.
yeah,
That's like I said. I think you could use that with skill building and training. You're still not going to close the experience gap. You need to
yeah,
actually deliver
yeah.
relevant work experience as well, which, as we've discussed, is hard for a university to do.
And a lot of that work experience is actually, the human to human aspect, right? And talking to people, collaborating, coordinating, prioritizing, project managing, working with your boss and your peers to achieve an outcome is not too technical. Of course, there is technical elements to the job, but a lot of it is actually the human, what I call the messy bits, right? Outside of using the tools, but engaging with your colleagues. That's the experience bit, which you can't get in the class. You can only get when working with an employer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then obviously just learning, as at the outset, learning to use the tool. It's easier to use it in a real application setting, and you'll make a mistake, you'll make a mistake again, but you'll then get it, as opposed to in a classroom where you might learn something and then forget it because you're not actually using it.
So I know we're close to time now, and I do want to maybe wrap up with, given this is an education podcast, and I ask all my guests about an educator in their life, in their career, that has been super impactful and really shaped where they are today. So I'd like to ask you that question, a teacher, or it could be a mentor, or that has been very impactful in your life, and why?
Oh, it's a great question, and consistent with our discussion. So I went to Yale Law School, and home of J.D. Vance, among others. And Yale has a phenomenal clinical education program, which means as a first year law student, you're actually doing cases, serving clients. And I was in the prison clinic. I worked with a professor by the name of Jay Pottinger, an assistant professor by the name of Bridget McCormick, who went on to become the Supreme Court of Michigan chief judge. And they were so phenomenal. The responsibility they provided to me on a case where we were trying to free a man who was imprisoned for life, we felt wrongly, in the state of Connecticut, and providing resources and support as we sort of pursued our theories and filed motions and argued in court, learning by doing at its best. And so that's Jay Pottinger and Bridget McCormick.
Fantastic. See, it's a lot of these stories, I find it's fascinating because it could be very, small experiences or very short experiences, which to you meant a lot, which they may not even have thought too much about themselves, right? But as an educator, your development journey has been instrumental.
Well, I know Jay thought a lot about that because the clinic ended up dropping like $100,000 on that case. So it was
okay. Yeah. And now the last segment on the show is one plugs. Give you an opportunity to plug someone, something, company, whatever it is. It's really up to you.
Well, most importantly, if you're in the U.S. And you're interested in apprenticeship, reach out to Apprenticeships for America, a nonprofit organization trying to advocate for the kinds of changes that we've been talking about here. And then if you're interested in the topic, my most recent book, Apprentice Nation, you can find on all the book platforms, including Amazon. And then I have a bi-weekly free newsletter called The Gap Letter, gapletter.com. Lots of people in sort of the higher ed workforce space subscribe, and I promise you it won't be boring. Try and keep it fun.
Yeah, no, I've read a few of that. It is a fun and a way you about these topics in the way that you do. So it's a newsletter. Do encourage you to go on there and have a look. Gap Letter. So, well, thank you very much, Ryan. Brings us up to our episode today. I loved hearing your insights and your experience. So thank you again for joining our episode about modern internships. And thank you everyone for tuning in again. I will see you at our next episode.